It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLab PGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLab PGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLab PGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLab PGH and our sister podcast, Moving to Live, firmly believe that movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not just an activity. Because of that, FitLab PGH, in addition to our weekly podcasts, does movement tips and lifestyle hacks, 1-minute videos we release on Instagram and YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And every Thursday, we do a written FitLab Pittsburgh features where we feature a mover in the Pittsburgh area. If you want to be featured, go to our website, click on the FitLab PGH features info, fill out a form, and get started. I'm a big fan of outdoor exercise. I'm a big fan of the Rails to Trails in Pittsburgh, and I think they are an unrecognized gem for people who like to move outside. That's why I was excited to be able to visit Etna and talk to Valerie Beichner, the executive director of Friends of the Riverfront. I think we had an interesting interview about the Friends of the Riverfront and how she changed her life and really meets the lifestyle idea that movement is a lifestyle, not just an activity, not only for her, but also for her family. I think you'll enjoy this interview. FitLab PGH is back with another podcast episode. It is a rainy Wednesday or Thursday, and not only did I go across a bridge, but I went through a tunnel to get to Etna today. And I haven't told today's guest, but the pressure is on her to continue the streak going. Every time we've done a podcast in a coffee shop, it's been a good podcast. I have no reason to doubt it is not going to be a good podcast today. After chatting for a few minutes, we are, and I'm looking around for the sign, and the Shiny Bean in Etna. Excellent coffee. So if you're looking for a place near Etna that has good coffee, that's the place to go. The guest today is number 8 in a line of people that I can trace back to, all the way back to Larry Joya suggesting that I interview Don Drolet. So everybody who has suggested people for FitLab Pittsburgh, thank you. This guest was suggested by Kathy Rogers of Aerotech. We are with Valerie Beichner. She is from Friends of the Riverfront. So before we find out your story, give us the elevator speech that you give when you're riding up the elevator to in a Penguins game, wearing a Friends of the Riverfront t-shirt or hat when people say, "What's that?" and "What do you do for them?"
Sure. Friends of the Riverfront is the local nonprofit organization that works toward quality of life for all Allegheny County residents through trails, riverfront trails. So we are the stewards of the trails. We work to extend the trails.
And we're going to talk more about that in the second part of the interview. But I knew this was going to be a very interesting interview for FitLab Pittsburgh because we believe that movement is a lifestyle, not an activity. And one of the questions I always ask FitLab Pittsburgh people is whether they started movement as a child or as an adult. But you told me when we first talked on the phone to arrange the interview that you are a recent comer to exercise, movement, and quality of life. Tell us a little bit, what was your life like before you found movement? What did you do, or what was different from now?
Sure. So, years ago, not that long ago, I lived a very, sedentary life and I didn't move at all. And I was a junk food addict and drank soda all the time and was a very heavy smoker. Up until around 2011, I did finally quit smoking. That was a huge hurdle to overcome. I smoked for about 10 years. And then around 2014, vanity and having 4 children was forcing me to examine losing weight. So we started, my husband and I started running in 2014, just doing 5Ks and small things of that nature.
And I know we always ask people what they've done in the past that it's kind of memorable that they like to tell people about movement related. But you told us you and your husband did something that is pretty cool, pretty unique, and I suspect it's something even your kids will tell their friends about it if they want to brag and mom and dad. Can you kind of tell the listeners what that was and why you did it?
So we started running in 2014, like I said, and running just slowly started to become more and more a part of our daily lives. And in 2016, my oldest child, Moira, was 10 years old and really wanted to raise money for Pittsburgh Children's Hospital. It's actually something she'd been asking us to do since she was in kindergarten and was first introduced to the notion of fundraising for, various charitable causes. So she designed T-shirts that we collected money for and we sold, and we named her project Moira's Mission. And Moira's Mission was all about raising funds for the Free Care Fund for Pittsburgh Children's Hospital. And that fund helps support families in need who couldn't afford care. And the hook for, Moira's Mission was my husband and I, we wore the shirts while we ran from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania along the 335 miles that are the C&O Canal Trail and the Great Allegheny Passage Trail.
And that was just the two of you running. It wasn't you ran a little bit, then drove ahead. You kind of leapfrogged for the entire length of the trail over, I think you said 11 days. 11
days, yes. So we took it very seriously. We trained for more than a year to be able to do this. We are not athletes. We were not athletes. It was something we had to do a lot of soul searching for and a lot of training for. My husband would get up in the morning and we would all drive him to the trail and he would run for 15 to 18 miles. And then I would have all 4 kids with me. And then we'd meet him around lunchtime and I would take over and run the next 15 to 18 miles. He would have the 4 kids. They would meet me. We would do about a 1-mile family fun run together. And then we'd have dinner and we'd get up the next day and do it all over again.
And my question I'm wondering about this is how come people in Pittsburgh don't know about things like this? Because that's pretty incredible. You've not only did something that for your husband and yourself is a bucket list type thing. That's something that if you're ever at a cocktail party and you want to impress somebody, I think you can call yourself an athlete. You don't have to say we're not athletes.
Maybe.
The fact that you introduced your kids to movement can be fun. It doesn't have to be, okay, mommy's going to the gym. Then she'll come back and we'll do fun stuff. They learned that you can be out on the trail and that's fun. So I think that's pretty incredible. My question with that would be, would you ever consider doing it again if you had time?
That's really ironic that you asked that question because my husband and I have started to seriously consider doing a Moira's Mission 2.0 this summer, and doing it again. And, maybe we take on more than it was supposed to be about a half marathon a day for each of us, but it stretched out to be a little bit more than that. We had planned for 2 break days, but we didn't take them. We just kept going for the 11 days. So yeah, we're looking at it for this summer and potentially considering doing it all over again, maybe doing it a little bit differently, but we like the challenge. We like it just the 2 of us out there, and our kids are older. So the kids could come out and do a little bit more with us now.
At FitLab Pittsburgh, we really believe that movement is a lifestyle, not an activity. And I think you explained initially why you started running and why you quit smoking. How did the transition from just saying, okay, I'm doing this for vanity reasons to, wow, I really enjoy doing this. I like being outside. I like doing races. How did that transition? And looking back at it, are you kind of shocked at what you've become in a good way?
I really am shocked. I was not someone, even though I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, I was not someone who grew up doing anything active. I'm a person who suffers anxiety. I'm a person who, and I still don't really consider myself an athlete or having any kind of physical ability, to be honest with you.
How many miles was it that you ran again from DC to
335? I think split between 2 people though.
So you ran over 100 miles in a week. I think you can put that aside and say, I'm an athlete.
Okay.
Own it.
I'll have to own that. And something just flipped. It was how I felt different. It was how I realized, how much better I felt. I didn't realize how crappy I felt until I started undertaking Moira's mission. And I really paid attention to the food that I was consuming and the beverages that I was consuming. And I really paid attention to the clarity of my mind and how I physically felt in the morning and the evening and how much more energy and happiness I felt. And once I started to realize that, that's when it really became ingrained and it really became something that I didn't have to think about doing every day. I wanted to do it every day. And it became, when there were instances where I couldn't run because I was either too busy or, the weather was just really too frightful, I was really angry that I couldn't go outside and run.
I think what many people who don't exercise from the very beginning or come to movement later are surprised to find is how calming and stress relieving it is. I mean, it's fairly difficult, especially if you're moving outside, to go for a run or a bike ride and feel worse when you get done than when you started.
Yeah, sometimes when you finish, right? Like, so now we train for marathons and ultra marathons. And sometimes when you finish those long runs on the weekend, you feel really like, oh, awful. But about 20 or 30 minutes later, you feel really great that you accomplished a goal for the day. You did something really great for yourself for the day. And, the soreness goes away, but that feeling of I did something that I myself never ever thought I could do in my lifetime, that sticks with you for a really long time.
I'm always curious about people who come to exercise. I say this loosely, later in life, is during adulthood rather than childhood. Friends and family members who knew you back when, do they look at you now and say, you're crazy, why do you do this stuff? Or what's the feedback, say, if you go back to a high school reunion?
My mom thinks I'm absolutely crazy. My mom's always saying, you don't have to do this, I say, you know what though, Mom? I really do have to do this because there's going to come a point in my life where I can't do it anymore. Or maybe I can't go the longer distances anymore. And that's going to be, a disheartening moment. But yeah, my mom thinks I'm crazy. Most people, when we say we do marathons, I mean, that's one thing, but once we start talking about the ultras or Moira's mission, then people are like, okay, you're literally, something's wrong with you. You're broken.
Clearly, Moira's mission is what you look back at as a pretty special thing for movement. What's on your bucket list for some sort of movement? It's like, look, at some point I'm going to do this, or my whole family is going to do this sort of movement activity that you're kind of keeping at the back of your mind.
Well, I personally would really like to do a Tough Mudder. That's a little more than just running. You have to have upper body strength, which I have zero of. So that's a goal. Last year, my husband and I undertook our first 50-mile race with the Baker Trail Challenge. The kicker with the Baker Trail is they only give you 1/3 of the medal because it's a 150-mile trail. So you have to run all 3 sections to earn a full medal. So that's a goal. And then I think I have delusions of someday running a 100-miler, but, we'll see if we get there.
I'm always impressed and curious when people take on exercise and movement later in life. You didn't just settle with running. You were sharing with us prior to recording that you have now hired a personal trainer once a week because somehow you've realized that, so this aerobic stuff is good, but I need to start working on strength too. How did you come up with that decision? And how is that working for you?
Well, honestly, and I don't even know where I read it, but I was reading an article that said that most people end up going into a home later in life because they don't have the ability to get up off the toilet. And they don't have the ability to do the small things anymore because they don't have the muscular strength. And I really looked at that and said, well, I can run, but is that what's going to help me later on in life? And it really isn't. It's really about focusing on my core strength overall. So I did add a personal trainer just for the first time earlier this year, thanks to the introduction from one of my very great friends. And it's phenomenal. I only go once a week. And he keeps me accountable, and he's showing me exercises that I can do and replicate at home, and I don't have to have a home gym. But at the same time, I go in there, for 1 hour on Saturday mornings, and I walk out of there and I feel really dead, but I feel really accomplished.
Let's get to the important point about that. Has it helped your running?
Core strength always helps your running. It keeps you balanced and it keeps you moving. You don't run with your legs, you run with your core, but most importantly, you run with your heart.
And have you found since starting the resistance training, it's a little bit easier on the ends of those long runs that you do on the weekends with your husband?
It is, yes. Yeah, I have found that.
Novel concept. Getting strong is helpful. So many people could benefit from that, whether they run or whether they just want to stay active and maintain their mobility throughout life. So you were sharing with us prior to us starting to record that you have a career in nonprofits, all of your working career, and that you have only recently come to working for Rails to Trails. How did that come about? You've described at the beginning of the interview what the Friends of the Riverfront is, and how did you get involved with that?
Well, Moira's mission is really how I got involved with that. And my husband and I did, a lot of research on the C&O Canal Towpath, which is beautiful, and the Great Allegheny Passage, which is equally beautiful, in order to do that run. And it was during that run that we fell in love with those trails. But more importantly, we fell in love with the people and the community out there. Nobody cares who you are or where you come from. It's, do you have enough water? Did someone steal your bike? Because most people don't run this. A lot of people cycle it. Most people don't run it. So that was the number one question we got. But just wonderful, family owned bed and breakfasts and, local businesses and eateries. And it's an amazing spirit that's out there on those trails. So, I was wooed back to full-time work in 2017, by a friend of mine. And Friends of the Riverfront in mid-2017 was looking for an executive director. And it's the local trail. It's the Three Rivers Heritage Trail. It's 24-mile network of riverfront trails here in the city of Pittsburgh, which is a gorgeous and beautiful amenity that also helps carry the gap, right, from the Homestead area all the way down to Point State Park in Pittsburgh. And I just jumped at the chance. They needed someone to help lift the organization. And I really wanted to work for a mission that meant something to me personally and professionally.
I know we were fortunate enough when we first started the podcast within the first couple of months to interview Bill Orr of the Montour Trail Council. And I was surprised at that point. I'm somebody who, wherever I've lived, I've used trails that have had it, but I was not aware that the Montour Trail was entirely volunteer, nonprofit. And it's the same thing with Friends of the Riverfront. So anybody that is using these trails in the Pittsburgh area, which in my opinion are the unrecognized gem, even though they are fairly widely used. I don't think people recognize that this is atypical for many places, but this is all nonprofit. So if you see them collecting pennies or you see that they need money to do some sort of repair job, if you use it, give some money. I think that's important to get across.
It is important. There is a distinction between Montour Trail Group and Friends of the Riverfront. Montour Trail Group is 100% volunteer led, and they are amazing individuals that volunteer with that group. And that includes, their construction and their stewardship and everything. Friends of the Riverfront does have paid staff. There are 3 full-time individuals there plus our Pulse fellow. So, we have paid support. But as far as taking care of the trail and that stewardship component, that is 100% volunteer manpower that we're taking out there on the trail. We're coordinating it and we're providing the tools and we're providing the training and the safety. But it's our own residents. It's the trail users that go out there and help take care of that amenity. And a lot of people think that we are City of Pittsburgh workers when we're out there doing our volunteer events. And the City of Pittsburgh is an amazing partner with us with the trail. They own the trail amenity. And they take care of a lot of the heavier things like paving the trail and fixing potholes and things of that nature. So we don't want to minimize their participation, but, we work from anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 volunteers a year, picking up litter and planting trees and mulching trees and flowers and fixing benches and all of these things. So, every little bit from, the dollar that you can give to the hour of volunteer support goes a really long way.
Somebody's listening to this and they're saying, well, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to help pick up trash. I'd like to help repair the trail. Maybe I have some skills that I think might be beneficial. How do they find out information, how they can actually be a volunteer trail steward? Is that the correct term? Or
that is the correct term. Yes. So we have 9 individuals who are considered our trail stewards. And these individuals are people who live near or just love the trail. And they're out there, many of them every day, a lot of them once a week, and they look for trail happenings. They look for garbage. They look to report in overgrown vegetation to Friends of the Riverfront so we know where to organize work parties. And then we have our, at-large volunteers who might participate with us once or twice a year to go out and do things. So if you're looking to get engaged, you can check out our website at friendsoftheriverfront.org. You can check us out on Facebook at Friends of the Riverfront, or you can email me personally at valerie@friendsoftheriverfront.org.
And we'll have all those in the show notes in case you don't have a pen. If you go to fitlabpgh.com, you'll be able to get all that information. I'm curious, now that you've been in the executive director position for a few years now, what were you most surprised about as far as a benefit for doing this? What's been the best part of the job?
The best part of this job is when somebody cycles or runs or walks by when you're on the trail at a volunteer event and says thank you. And that goes a really long way, because you know that what you're doing is helping to take care of a civic amenity and improving the quality of life for the people in those neighborhoods. That's probably the most rewarding thing that happens, in this position.
And if I heard you right, 24 some miles and change, or did I hear 48 miles? I'm bad with numbers.
No. We have 24 current miles, mostly all within the city of Pittsburgh. However, we're not just the stewards of the Three Rivers Heritage Trail. We work with our partners to extend the trail. So we work here in the Allegheny Valley corridor, which is why we relocated to the wonderful community of Etna. So we're working to build from Millvale, where the trail currently stops, all the way up to Freeport, Pennsylvania, along the bank of the Allegheny River. And that will open up another 26 miles of Three Rivers Heritage Trail. Now, keep in mind, trail building is a long-term goal. So a lot of this we might not see for the next 20 years or so. But I digress. It's about delivering the same quality of life and opportunity to these communities along this corridor.
What would it take to make that happen faster than 20 years? I mean, would it take us, obviously it would take a significant amount of money, but people are listening and you never know who's listening. Somebody says, we want to set the goal or doing maybe 5 miles a year. What would it take versus what's happening right now, which is a lot of hard work?
A miracle. No, I'm kidding. A lot of the hardest sections are the hardest sections for a reason. And, our goal is Riverfront Trail. A lot of the riverfront is still occupied, by industry, which is fantastic. And a lot of our riverfront trail is occupied by railroad, which in and of itself is still a wonderful amenity to have here in the Pittsburgh region for our economic development and our commerce. So that's what we work with, right? It's individual to each community, what the needs are in the community and where they want their alignment of the Three Rivers Heritage Trail to be. That does in and of itself take a lot of work. So when we say that we're planning the trail up the corridor, we're not planning to take property. We're not planning to push people out. We're planning to engage and connect communities. So it's just a lot of conversations. It's a lot of planning that has to happen before you can ever get to that design and build.
I think it is fair to say it would take a miracle, not in a negative way, but just because there's so many parties and individuals and companies and entities involved that just like herding chickens, sometimes it takes a while for everybody to get on the same page or in the same chicken coop.
Exactly.
And I don't know where that analogy came from. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I think one of the things about these gems, Rails to Trails, wherever you are, whether you're in the Pittsburgh area or other places, is sometimes those of us who are regular users of it forget that what we take as normal, good trail etiquette, some people don't know. Maybe they get on the trail where there's not signs or there's not an informational placard, or maybe they're beginning exercisers like you were a few years ago, where I know when you start to do a new activity, it's scary and it feels like everybody is whizzing by you, etc. If you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about trail etiquette and things as the executive director that you think deserve to be recognized? Last week it was 0 degrees, -5. I think we're scheduled tomorrow or Friday to be up in the low 60s. So there's going to be some people who are going to get those Christmas bikes out, break out those running shoes, put away the parkas and say, hey, we're going to get out on the trail. this will air after that, but before the warm weather. Some things that probably people need to be reminded of, even those of us who are regular users of the trail.
Trail etiquette is all about common courtesy, really. If you're a slower trail user, like a walker or a runner, you just want to stay right. You want to be aware of your surroundings. I like to run with music, but I find myself constantly looking around me and behind me to ensure that I'm not in someone's way. You don't have to be perhaps that paranoid about it, but it's just about looking. It's about being aware of your surroundings. It's about moving over when a cyclist is coming from behind you. It's about moving over when a runner is coming towards you. It's just about ensuring that we're all out there together, enjoying the trail together, and ensuring that we make, it a wonderful experience for everyone that's out there.
I know I'm curious. This is not meaning to put you on the spot. You can read various forums, not just in Pittsburgh, but around the country on when you're approaching somebody from behind on the trail. And I know in the cycling community, 30% of the cyclists will say you're a terrible person if you say on your left when you're approaching. 30% will say that's the way you are. And the remaining 40 or so percent will say, well, you shouldn't have to say anything at all because you're a cyclist. And I'm kind of tongue in cheek with that last one. As a runner, what would you prefer to hear as a cyclist or a faster runner overtakes you?
So funny story. When I first moved to Pittsburgh 10 years ago, I wasn't a trail user, but I worked in the terminal building. So I would use the trail that I considered back then more of a sidewalk to get to my building. And a gentleman came up behind me on a bike and said, on your left. And I moved to the left. And he goes, that's okay, sweetie. You only had a 50-50 chance getting it right. As a runner, I do like to hear the on your left or even a bell. I mean, I hear a bell. I know that I need to move over so I try not to keep my music up too loud, but some people don't know what the bell means, and it means move to your right. So I always appreciate the shout out of, on your left.
Now we'll enter my personal pet peeve, uncontrolled dogs. If you can kind of talk about what you like to see as a runner and also as an executive director, because as you said, the trail is for everyone and having dogs is a responsibility, but it's also a lot of fun. So what do you like to see with dogs when they're on the trail? I
love seeing dogs on the trail. I'm a dog owner. They're just so beautiful and delightful. But you got to keep your dog on a leash. You got to clean up after your dog. That's actually a huge complaint we get from trail users is folks not cleaning up after their dogs. But leash your dog. We have a lot of children on the trail, and children themselves can be unpredictable, right? So, we'd hate to have an accident. And when you're running or cycling towards an animal and they're not leashed and they might see you as a threat, that's sometimes when things, can go awry, right? That animal certainly wasn't meaning to harm you, but you became a threat. So, leash your animal and pick up after your animal.
Problems that you see new trail users need to have education on as they're coming, or things that you say, if I could just give new trail users who are coming out, it's 2019, weather's going to warm up, something to say, look, these one or two pieces of information in addition to what you just mentioned, keep these in mind as you're using the trail. Anything that comes to mind as an executive director and as a relatively new trail user, other than as a sidewalk to get to work?
As a relatively new trail user, we do post the trail rules in various locations, so be aware of the signage and read it. Stay to the right. And honestly, pay it forward. It's about us all taking care of this amenity together. So, please don't leave your garbage on the trail. Please pick up after yourself. And if you're in a position to and you see something on the trail that needs to be put in the garbage, please do that as well.
I see T-shirts coming out with "Stay to the Right" on the back of them and the logo of the trail in the front of them.
That's a great that's a great shirt.
We've been talking with Valerie Beichner. She is the executive director, Friends of the Riverfront, 24 plus miles of trails in Allegheny County, most of it in the city of Pittsburgh. When you're riding along those rivers and you recognize the fact that you don't have to worry about getting buzzed by a car, it's people like Valerie who are giving you that opportunity. And if you think that you have some time to volunteer or some money to contribute so we can expand the trails to maybe not only, this is Pipe Dream, be able to go to DC, but maybe someday all the way to Philadelphia, consider giving some money. Valerie, I want to thank you for taking time for introducing me to a new coffee shop, of course.
You're welcome.
And also for telling us more about another section of trail in the Pittsburgh area, which again, I cannot overemphasize how these are unrecognized gems in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, and happy trails.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLab PGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLab PGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.